this afternoon, but that's on me. Ryan Pike, the managing editor of Flames Nation, joins us. Mr. Pike, good afternoon to you, sir.
My goodness, an awful lot of buildup to Will disclosing he's becoming an interpretive dancer.
Well, yes.
I can still hear you.
Thanks for spoiling it.
Now you don't have to listen in July.
We were going to move everything, and we were going to allow him to come prancing through the door and have a wide-angle shot, but Pike,
it's important to use our platform to give deserving people some exposure. So,
yes.
Don't you want to keep this YouTube license? Don't you want to keep that?
I don't know how this works. I don't know how.
Just thinking, if you had me dancing interpretively on it, it might be a good way to lose it.
It's our salute to analytics. Here it comes. So I don't even know why I went there.
What a weird last 2 weeks, eh?
Oh my, isn't it? Like this should be you and I talking about the building. And that's the notes I have, right? Because we have not had a chance, other than my apologies to you. Come on, Ryan, I want to know this. Rob, I'm trying to write an article.
And I had to, because of the way, this is not a knock at all at the fine people of the city of Calgary. Behind the scenes, a small army of people have been shepherding this monstrosity through basically since 2013 to varying levels of success. But they give you a package, and they basically take probably 8 years of work and cram it into 6 pages. And of course they can't put everything in. So, sure. And then half of our questions, we ask the mayor things, we ask John Bean things, we ask the premier things. And the answer to a lot of it is, we'll see what happens when the agreements are done, which is a deeply unsatisfactory answer when you really want to turn things over in your head. So
right.
It was a fun day.
It was a day. Today is a day where you, and we use the Bob Hartley, surprised, yes, shocked, no. What about today's news?
Surprised, yes, to a certain extent, because it seemed from the outside like, okay, they made their choice. When Brad Treliving decides, okay, I'm out, it feels like, okay, they made their choice. And then when Don Maloney 2 weeks ago does his press conference, and when he's asked very bluntly, hey, what's happened to Daryl? And he goes, we'll see. That was interesting, because they had the opportunity. Like, how many of these kind of press conferences have we seen where the new GM, the old GM, whoever's using the title GM gives a full-throated defense of their coach, and you go, okay, that makes sense. He has a contract. That makes sense to me.
Right.
So the fact that they gave him his walking papers before his extension even kicked in, I think it doesn't kick in officially till July 1.
Yep.
That's interesting to me, because it is a ownership group that is, as they should be, loath to give people money to not do stuff for them, giving the guy money to not do stuff for them. And so that was probably the most interesting part of it. But it certainly makes a lot of things make sense in hindsight, eh?
Yeah, I think so. I think I go back to the fall, really, where, Brad made the most out of the summer that he did. He got some players back. Daryl, obviously, we know he can coach, and they had a good run, regular season. You guys both deserve extensions. Here they are. And Daryl takes his, and Brad doesn't take his. Right. But at the time, sure, ownership thought these are our two guys moving forward. We're good. Right. And here we are 10 months later, and neither one are here.
Yeah, it's on a certain level, I tweeted this earlier. It certainly kind of has those 2002 Greg Gilbert, Mark Savard vibes, doesn't it? Where, Craig Button, and he's gone on record saying that this was, he didn't handle this particularly well in retrospect. But, you have Greg Gilbert and Mark Savard butting heads for months and months and months. Yep. And then you trade the player, and then a couple weeks later, you fire the coach anyway. Yeah. So you end up with neither of the pieces you really wanted to have. And, granted, I mean, they turned Mark Savard into, a punchline of a prospect by the name of Ruslan Zanulin, who played 0 games in North America in his life. But, it is what it is. And I think you could say that they've learned some lessons from the past, or at least you hope they have. But I mean, this is going to be, as much as we talked about, last summer being a seismically important summer Johnny Gaudreau walks from free agency. Sean Monahan gets jettisoned out with a first-round pick to clear cap space. They make the big trade with Florida. They sign Huberdeau. They sign Uyghur. They sign Kadri. It really felt like a change in the guard on the ice. This summer could be up there with maybe the summer of 2000 in terms of, it's the first time in 23 years they've had a no GM and no coach.
Yep.
And they have the ability to chart the course for the next 23 years based on the decisions they make over the next 2 months.
I am okay. I want to do this in pieces. Let's start with the piece this morning. I am really impressed with Don Maloney today. I thought Don Maloney had an excellent press conference.
Yeah. I like Don. I think Don's really well spoken. I think the emotionality of Brad's departure 2 weeks ago was still very evident on his face. I think he was wearing it. And I think, when you have someone, people are well aware of the history between Brad Treliving and Don Maloney. Brad got his first job in the National Hockey League working for the Coyotes under Maloney. Maloney, really groomed him as a hockey ops guy. And there's a lot of, Brad's fingerprints on Maloney and vice versa. And when someone you are that close with decides, I'm not feeling it, I got to go, even if you understand why they're doing it, the first time you have to sit and talk about it is tough. So from a human element, I completely get it. And I was completely willing. I thought he was articulate, or at least as articulate as he could reasonably expect it to be in that kind of emotional situation. I thought he was great today in terms of laying out a lot of different things, talking about next steps really clearly, dropping some news that Oliver Shillington is expected to be back, which, I think there was some whispers about that based on Oliver's sudden appearances on Instagram when he hadn't really posted since July of last year. But, I think the fan base could have used some good news. And I think the Oliver news is landing very nicely with the fan base. But, I thought he was really good at sort of just laying things out without airing any dirty laundry in public. So I think that the press conference was exactly what I think the Flames and the media and the fan base wanted and needed it to be.
That's a great way of putting it. What they needed it to be, because it was a guy in charge who laid out a case and then answered the questions. And I wanted to bring up one piece, Ryan, and you've been a little bit more in the business than I have been of late. So it caught me, was the comment about, I talked to 25 players, coaching staff, trainers, and the prominent agents, which has to be Alan Walsh, right? Has to be Alan Walsh.
There's a few. I imagine Noah Hannafin's represented by a CAA with Pat Brisson. I'm going to get it wrong, Pat. I apologize. Brisson.
Pat Brisson, yeah.
Yeah, Pat Brisson. I imagine JP Barry, perhaps. Alan Walsh, Darren Ferris. Pretty much if your contract is up in the next year or two, I guarantee you that, Don Maloney probably at least sent you an email or a text and said, hey, you got 5 minutes. Because that's the kind of thing you need to know about. I mean, you need to control what you can control. I mean, if you're Don Maloney and you're trying to make the Flames or enable your new GM to make the Flames the best hockey team they can be, there's some things you can't control. You can't control geography. You can't control market size. You can't control travel. Like there's a lot of crap that you got to live with.
Yep.
And the rest of it is the controllables. I mean, say what you will. I mean, bless his heart, Mackenzie Weegar got a building done in 11 days.
It's amazing. Quite honestly. 100
Mackenzie Weegar and the fine, and
Weegar does it in 11.
Mackenzie Weegar and the fine behind the scenes folks of the city of Calgary. Those are the two heroes.
Those are the heroes, folks. Those are the heroes.
But it's you've been in that building. I mean, folks, if you've been in the Saddle Dome, we love the Saddle Dome. It's old. Like that's not meant to be disparaging. It's just a fact. It's an old building. The footprint of the building. I mean, every time someone comes up to me and says, geez, why don't they just renovate the building? The footprint of the building is a footprint of a building from 1983. And it's essentially a clown car of amenities crammed into closets and available space. And basically there's no wasted space because they have things on top of things on top of things. So,
but you've seen it. Those are add-ons. They created the extra space underneath seats became storage because of necessity.
Yeah, and then sort of became also it becomes secondary locker rooms. the Calgary Wranglers are using the Flames room because they don't have their own room, which is, granted,
It's not you don't really in the American League, right?
You don't build a building. Well, that's what it was. In 1983, when the best architects at the time are sitting down and going, let's build this thing to last the next 20 years. I don't think at any point they go, what we're going to have? We're going to have a hockey team with more than 2 coaches, and we're going to have a spa in there because the guys are going to get beaten up and we need to make sure they don't die. And we're going to have medical, and we're going to have training rooms. And we're going to have video, and we're going to have 2 more teams and a lacrosse team.
Dude, I don't mean to correct you. I do it, but I don't mean to. But the actual plans of that building?
Oh, that would have been 80 and 81.
It would have been 79. It would have been before Empire Strikes Back comes out.
I think they probably did the last pieces in 80, but yeah, 79, 80.
Drawings, the main drawings, like it took a while, right?
Yeah, so I have a copy. Some lovely person sent me a copy of the final architectural renderings. I think the date I see on there is 1982.
Sure.
So that's when everything was done, when they signed off and everything and they sealed it, 82. So still like that's 41 years ago.
Right.
And I just completed I had a long chat with Cliff Fletcher, David Poyle. We started talking about how the things were back when they started off in Atlanta, where it was like 2 or 3 guys working out of an Atco trailer outside the Omni because the building wasn't ready yet. And they had it was a revelation in the National Hockey League when they added an assistant coach. It was Boom Boom Jeffrion and some trainers, and then like holy cow, it was seen as heresy when they hired an assistant coach, and then everyone hired an assistant coach. Yeah. And so this arms race of every team has 3 coaches and a video coach and multiple goalie coaches and this, that, and the other thing. And now you're seeing more and more teams, San Jose, Edmonton, Toronto, so on, with their farm team either in the same building or really, really close. I mean, no one anticipated that in 1981, 82. So, no one's saying boo about the quality of the design for the time, but it obviously ain't 1982 anymore. And if you compare a car built in 82 to a car built now, it's like they're hardly built for the same purpose.
Right.
And that's the same thing with the building. So
that's exactly it. So
you're trying to attract 2022 players with a 19, like it's like saying, thank you for signing with the Calgary Flames. Here's your brand new 1982 Cadillac.
No, that's exactly what it's saying. So let's stay in order because I'm coming back to this point because it's a very astute point and it's one that I think is really important. But before I get there, 2 other things that I thought were important. One, the question about Brad Treliving. I didn't think he'd come back. Didn't think it was on the table, but it's answered, right? It's out. It's done. The other one was because Mitch Love, Ryan Huska, they've got some really excellent internal candidates. Yeah. GM's going to hire their coach. Yeah. Those were really important for me to hear.
And GM and the GM's going to Maloney's hiring the GM. GM's hiring the coach. Coach is determining their coaching staff. Yep. So it's not like
as it should be.
Yeah, it's not like anyone's necessarily saddled with anyone else. It's everyone's going to get to make their own decisions, at least based on what we got told today.
Yeah. Would you? I know that some things are out there and have been out there for a while, and some things people buy into, some things don't buy into. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talk a lot about external companies, headhunting companies. Companies that are specifically, hired to find candidates and things like that. Or there's the traditional way. Don Maloney goes and picks up resumes and go. Are you predispositioned to one method or another?
Not especially. I think you end up getting a lot of the same people both ways. I think, what worked with Brian Burke has probably like a network of contacts in the league second to few in the sport. And so when they hired Brad Treliving, and that hire turned out reasonably well, when they hired Brad Treliving, they interviewed one guy, Brad Treliving, but it was a product of, probably I'd say better part of 3 or 4 months of Burke during the course of his everyday affairs and is doing the interim GM job, talking to people saying, who's the next guy? Who's up and coming? Who should we get? If you were me, who would you hire?
Yep.
And making a list, and the name that came up most frequently was Brad Living. And
Right.
Don Maloney has been around hockey almost as long as Brian Burke. Not quite, but I'd say he'd also have a pretty good Rolodex. I am fascinated based on they travel in similar circles, but also we had Don Maloney spending all that time out in the desert. I am just fascinated to see what the list of candidates will end up being, because I don't imagine that Maloney will only interview one person, but that's going to be a very interesting list of names, because I think it'll give us some insight into what do the Flames see as priorities, what do they see as what they want to do. And the fascinating thing to me is, especially we on the site we did, Robert Munich did a piece on Craig Conroy's candidacy, and I did one on Brad Pascal.
Yeah.
Brad Pascal and Craig Conroy are great candidates. I'd say equally good candidates. They're both really good at different things. And I think that's the fascinating part, because you can have here's a name I threw up in the mailbag was Alexandra Mandrycky in Seattle. She's the AGM. She came out of she and AC Newman created. AC Newman, it wasn't AC. But yeah, she was one of the co-creators of War on Ice. She was, in analytics for the Wild for a long time. Then she went into Seattle, where she's, I believe, in her second year as AGM, or second season, but she was hired early. She was like their first Hockey Ops hire. So it's basically third season. Yeah. And so she's absolutely a whiz, and not only at analytics, but communicating and integrating analytics. That's a good thing. Is she, does she have the pro hockey experience that, say, Craig Conroy has? No, but Craig Conroy also has probably more scouting experience in terms of touching a bunch of different parts of the organization, running the farm team for a little bit, helping out with pro scouting, helping out with amateur scouting. And Brad Pascal's basically run a team within a team. He's the person at the head of their development team. And if you look at sort of some of the things they've done, putting good people to have success, not only as players, but as coaches, the National Hockey League, they've been really good at finding smart people and moving them up. Heck, they had some trainers, I believe, from Stockton move up to the NHL roster. And so if you're able to do that kind of translational work in terms of bringing people in, I mean, Conroy's group brings people into the organization, and Pascal's group turns them into NHLers. I don't know if you can say that any one piece of that is more important than the other one, but that is to say, there's going to be so many different, really cool candidates with so many just disparate types of expertise. And it's going to be really interesting to see, based on who they hire, what they feel is the thing they need to emphasize organizationally more than other pieces. Because it's like if you hire a head coach who in their presentation just talks about their power play for 1,000 years, that the organization feels special teams is that important. And so what's it going to look like? It's exciting, because we haven't had this level of uncertainty in the organization on the hockey ops side, and to a certain extent a little bit of uncertainty based on free agency coming up in a year on the roster side. We haven't had this kind of flux in probably 2 decades, but Don Maloney repeatedly said he's excited, and it's an exciting time. And I don't think he's wrong. I think there is sort of some palpable excitement around the club, because the weird questions, like the big looming questions, the building, the GM, the coach, they're answered, they're dealt with. And now it's a matter of figuring out what it looks like.
Whoa, slow down, cowboy. The building isn't answered.
We'll see.
Okay. You sound more optimistic than I do. I just, and my pessimism has nothing to do with hockey or the deal itself. It's just politics. I don't trust politics.
Oh, come on. You don't like having 3 elections held in this area around the same thing over and over again?
I'm getting used to it. Yeah, I'm getting used to it, right? Like, I'm getting used to it. One last thing on Maloney, and then I want to go back to the point you were making a little while ago. There's no sense of this is a rebuild, this is a reload, that they feel they've underachieved, and that they've got young players to integrate. There's no doubt about it. But I didn't get the sense from him that this was about tearing it down and starting from the studs.
No, and looking at the math, I mean, I think if everyone on one way is brought back, I was looking at Cap Friendly the other day. If everyone on a one way is brought back, they have 20 players signed, and their cap hit would be about 83.3 on a cap ceiling of 83.5. So obviously, they're probably, I don't think it's unfair to say they probably bury Kevin Rooney's deal in the American League just for the cap reasons. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they try to shed, I'd say 3-4 million of existing cap, and easiest way to do that is you bring up kids. You make a trade or two and you bring up kids. And I think, we've talked about, Walker Duehr is going to be a full-time NHLer next year. He's making $50,000 more than league minimum, which is just an incredible piece of work by everybody involved. Even the player, I mean, that's a good deal. But I think, they've had some opportunities for these fresh faces. So I think they have, it's going to be a fascinating few months just to see who stays, who goes, and what holes they have for kids to fill. Because the last few seasons, I mean, with one or two exceptions, we basically, if you mapped out the roster on the first day of training camp, with maybe one or two exceptions, you would have had it all right.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to think Vladar's out, right? That they'll move Vladar to give Wolf space. If they can, I'm assuming they can find him a home. It's easy for me to say.
You think so? I mean, he's one of those guys that, he's only played he's played basically 2 full NHL seasons, and he hasn't played a ton. And I think if you're whoever's the GM in however long, like at the draft, you're trying to sell him on players or on teams. He's 25-ish.
Yep.
And he's played not a ton of hockey. And I think you can basically just point to, it's like, oh, Dan Vladar didn't work. Look at the team. Not a lot of stuff worked. So you can't really blame that on him. And he's still a super young goaltender with a really good attitude and a lot of promise. And he, his mobility throughout the league will have nothing to do with his play. It just, he has the bad fortune. We always talk about all these promising young goaltenders that had the bad fortune of playing behind Mika Kiprasov. He has the unfortunate timing of being in front of Dustin Wolf at a time where Dustin Wolf has nothing left to achieve at the American League level, save for perhaps a championship.
That's it. And I'm, by the way, and we don't even have to talk about it, but I'm going after a Group 6 free agent and offering him a 1-year, one-way league minimum, because I don't think he'll get it anywhere else.
Maybe. I mean, there's, assuming
I'm
you're talking
Phillips, but
assuming you're talking, I was assuming you're talking about Matt Phillips and not like someone else.
I can't let it go, Ryan. I just can't let it go.
Honestly, he's from Calgary. We always talk about this. This will be a terrible approximation. And I apologize for making it. We talk about wanting to do the best for someone like Michael Backlund, who's been so good in this community and for this team. I think to a certain extent, you also want to do it for your prospects where, say what you will about what they ended up getting or not getting for him. The Flames gave Yusuf Alamaki a chance to play regular minutes by throwing on waivers. They had the cap space. They could have stashed him. They didn't do it. They could have, I don't think it would have been tenable to carry, 2 extra defensemen with Mackey and Malamaki both being extra pieces. It would have been fair to them. And in their, they didn't do that. They gave him a chance to go somewhere and play. And so I think whenever the Wranglers playoff run is over, whoever's the GM at that point, sit down, have a meal with him, say, what do you want to do? What are you thinking? And then if he wants to go, you say, great, thank you. We appreciate your contributions. And if there's any part of them, it's like, I don't know, who's coaching this year? I think that's a conversation you have. And, I don't think throwing a 1-year league min deal would be bad for anybody, but it's just a question of where does he want to be and what does he want to have the opportunity to do? Because, he's had so much success that I think to a certain extent, he's earned the right to write his own ticket. I'm still not fully convinced he's an NHLer, but I think he's earned the right to play his way out of the NHL at this point.
Yeah, and then that's a good way of putting it. Back to your Cadillac comparison, and I'm not 100% sure that I'm exactly talking about the same thing, but one of the things that is beginning to jump out at me, and I was watching that game last night, that Boston-Florida game. It's hard to watch 19 in white. It just is, because woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Building might have helped. Certainly can't match Florida on taxes. We know that. Maybe making him the captain would have helped. Who knows? But at some point, hockey, the NHL, the Flames, we got to have a conversation now. This is beginning to feel a little bit like the old Canadian equalization problem. That was $1. That was a financial thing, and the league had to step in. I'm beginning to worry that, as much as I hate to say it because I never bought into it, so you're not allowed to draft American kids Coronado, we're going to get them for what? you know, I look at Winnipeg. Winnipeg's going to be really interesting because if they blow that up, how are, you know, there's a couple of those kids they brought from Atlanta with them. They drafted a lot of those kids. Hellebuck's a really good goaltender, and he doesn't want to go through a rebuild. I'm just a little bit worried that we might be living in an era of hockey in this country that's making it difficult for us, these teams, to keep star players.
I'll say this. I mean, you know why players want to play in Toronto? Because they've got a good team. Like they have, it's a market where hockey matters, and you either love or hate the attention, but you know what to expect.
You know what to expect.
The team's very good. I mean, as loath as we are to praise the Leafs in this market or any other Canadian market, I mean, if you look on paper, the team they built, it's underachieved in the playoffs, but it's a powerhouse regular season team, a juggernaut, to steal a Chris Johnsonism. And they've managed to, you know, Mark Giordano could have gotten a lot more money anywhere else. He took pennies on the dollar to play in Toronto because he wanted a chance to win.
No doubt.
And if you can, you know, I think the challenge is you got to build it up. You got to, you know, make these organizations, these cities. I mean, you know, Calgary is a fantastic city. You and I are unabashedly pro Calgary.
100%.
And, you know, it's one of the more unique markets in the country. And I think, you know, you see the alumni who stick around here, you know, one of the most active alumni groups in the entire NHL.
Biggest and the most active, for sure.
Yeah. They don't stick around because, you know, oh, it's got mountains. They stick around for the whole package. I just think the challenge is, you know, how do you build a program? You know, Toronto has a program. Edmonton has a program. And yeah, it really helps that you have a McDavid or a Draisaitl or an Austin Matthews or a Marner to build it around. But okay, like I think if you want it, for better or for worse, those teams in those markets have identified their aces and locked them in long term, paid them handsomely, and built around them. And the degree to which they can build around them determines how far they go in the postseason. Yep. But you know, that's the way it goes. I mean, we had that here where for a few years, you know, in the aughts, before, you know, Mika Kiprusoff and Jerome McGinley got a little on in years, you know, the Flames brought in some fairly significant names in free agency because you could say, you know, the idea of, hey, you want to come into Calgary and play with Jerome McGinley? The answer for most people is, ooh, that sounds kind of cool. What kind of money are you offering? The money helps, but the you know, having that opportunity to dangle by players is a thing that gets people's attention. And I think right now they're sort of in a state of flux where who is the do you want to come to Calgary and play with X? Who's the X in that situation? Because once you figure out who the X is, then I think you can start really building.
Except that you are having agents openly talk about the fact that it's the 7 Canadian markets that are at the top, that are put on the no trade lists for players. Yeah. You had Oliver Ekman-Larsson's agent, you know, when he got traded to Vancouver, went on Vancouver radio and said players don't want to play in Canada because the pressure is too much. Those are the things that I'm talking about, right? I agree with you. You build a program. Listen, you get Connor McDavid, you're going to come play with Connor McDavid. No problem. But
some guys love pressure, though. I mean, do you think Jerome McGinley shirked away from pressure? Some guys are just wired that way. Some guys love the pressure.
But Jerome got to a point, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but Jerome got to a point where enough, I want to go win, right? And that's to your point. You got to build the program. That's job number one. Build the program, and then we can have the conversation. But last year, the Flames had tops in the Pacific Division, won a banner, got to the second round, didn't go well. Yeah. Fans love it.
And
two players walked away.
I bet you if you put some truth serum into Brad Treliving, the plan was, you know, you re-up Gaudreau, you re-up Tkachuk, and then you go, okay, how do you make things work around them for the cap and from play style perspective? And then they got dealt a fairly significant curveball. Granted, a curveball that contractually was somewhat of their own making. You know, they put themselves in a situation for that to happen, but they had a plan that when he walked you through it, it made some sense.
But if you were playing in Calgary next, okay, let's just say they built that building, right? When they announced it, those two players would have played in that building. They would have played in whatever Calgary next became. So they would have been in a new building with a new facility. If you had made Tkachuk the captain, these are what's ifs and woulds and coulds and all of those sort of things. I am just saying Ryan, as somebody who lived through the Canadian equalization times, it's beginning to feel a little bit like that in some cases. Now, it's not financial from the standpoint of the dollar anymore because it's an even playing field. And to your point, build a program. But I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens in Winnipeg now. I'm really going to be fascinated to see what happens in Winnipeg. And, the new building here is going to be, you know what it's like when you can start bringing guys through a state-of-the-art building and they see technology and they see that stuff, it's huge. And that's part of the problem here. But you need to start addressing some of that too. You want to be a destination that players want to come and stay. And I'm beginning to feel like that might be an issue in Canada right now. Not for everybody and not for everyone, but I think it's worth noting.
And we're also in a position now where, like, okay, if you look at the 7 Canadian teams, I mean, if you look at the rosters and look at the trajectories, Toronto has a fighting chance to win something. Edmonton has a fighting chance to win something.
Yes.
Vancouver is in flux. Calgary's in flux. Winnipeg's in flux. Ottawa's in flux. Montreal's in flux.
Yeah.
So 5 out of 7 markets are in various stages of
rebuilding or reloading or whatever.
Or at the very least soul searching in terms of you have 5 out of 7 in where do we go from here? And Toronto and Edmonton are capped out. So if let's just say you are a Canadian, you are a player. If you're an American player and you're sitting down or basically a player from anywhere, if you're sitting down and making your no move, Edmonton, probably Edmonton and Toronto can't afford you. And the other 5 teams, you don't really know what they're doing quite yet. So in a year, maybe, Vancouver's further down the road, maybe Calgary's further down the road, and you sort of have a sense of what they want to do.
Yep.
But like for Ottawa, like, okay, you're going to have new ownership. Great. It's still Ottawa. I love Ottawa, but it's still Ottawa.
You might have Snoop Dogg as your owner. That may be
I don't know if I like that.
You might be the whole game changer right there.
Now, I just watch Ryan Reynolds get Snoop Dogg to join his consortium.
I don't know what's going on there. I want to talk about the Wranglers before I let you go, but before I do that, and we glossed over it, we've touched on it, we've come and anything that you want to point out. We're almost a week now from the announcement that there's a deal in place in principle, pending, funding post-election. You've been sorting through it. I think we're beginning to learn different details and everything of it. I'll just give you what I'm thinking, and then you take it wherever you want. I find that a lot of people are okay with the vision of it. Like this is not the same deal. You and I were talking about this is not. So comparing the one that walked away or whatever to this one, that's not the same deal. It's not the same plan.
No, like what
they're missing right now, Ryan, to me, is they need somebody out in the community as a champion. There's no Ken King making the rounds. There's nobody, you know what I mean? There's nobody who's hosting a podcast or doing a radio show or a television show and going, we need this Calgary and this is why. And it's right now, I think it's getting beat up in a lot of places because there is nobody defending it. And I'd like to see that. I think, I don't get a vote in this, but if it's not John, go ahead.
If we're being clear here, on May 29th, we all get a vote on it. To a certain
extent. but you gotta get out and talk about it, right? You are allowing one side of this narrative to be taken over.
Once we get past the election, I think the uncertainty will be sort of taken out of it a bit, and I think maybe certain bodies will be a little bit more, will be less reticent to really go out on a limb for it. But I mean,
see the plan I have. This is my plan. If I was Notley, this is what I'd do today. I would say, not only am I going to build that arena, I'm going to build a new stadium. That's my plan today. That's what I would do. You one up the other side. Don't tell me that you don't know what the deal is. It's not transparent. You want to take a look at it. No. You come up and say, I see your arena and I raise you a football stadium. That's how I would address this.
I mean, I don't hate the deal in principle. Looking at the shape of it, I wrote a lengthy breakdown of the site. They included stuff that really needed to be included. I think a lot of John Bean actually touched on this when he was speaking at the press conference. If your idea for a public gathering space is let's just shut down a road, that's not much of a plan. And if the idea, because like the big headache with Stampede Park, and we all love Stampede Park. The biggest pain in the ass is parking and getting in and getting out. And anytime you say, hey, do you want to come to a Wranglers game, or you want to go to a Roughnecks game or a Flames game? The first reaction from whoever you're talking to is, are you gonna drive? Should I? Where are we gonna park?
100%.
And so that was something that came up a lot during behind the scenes during the last iteration. The biggest exposure the city had was the transportation and event management plan. And so now it's like, okay, the things you need to do to make it so that people can actually go to this place, enjoy this place, and get the hell out in any kind of any kind of velocity, they're in place now. And they have granted, I need to see better estimates than just a line item with $270 million. There's been reports, the CBC, I believe Jason Markosoff did a column a couple days ago that said, he was talked to someone close to the project, and they said could be about $100 million just for that 4-lane underpass below the CPR line on 6th. That sounds about right. So you're looking at, okay, 100 million for that, and then like 100 and some million for 17th and for 15th and for the south entrance of Stampede Park. So all those things make sense, and including them makes sense, and having everything up front makes sense, because that way on the back end of this thing, it doesn't sprawl, you don't get surprises. But at the same time, I mean, if this is the way I see this happening, and I'm in no way a prognosticator of things. I'm right as often as I'm wrong. That's why I don't play the stock market at all. But the way I can sort of see this happening is, whoever wins the provincial election, even if it's a new government, the city's main thing that they've been hat in hand for with the province is, we need money to fix downtown. And this by no means is a magic bullet. There's sundry kinds of societal problems they need to deal with. But if the idea is the province has X dollars to give to Calgary for infrastructure for the downtown area, and this is how the city wants to spend it, okay, cool. I mean, I think that's as much. I think if you're going to blame anyone for the parts you don't like about the deal, I think it lives and dies with the city, because the city's the one. This is the whole sales pitch for Stampede Park redevelopment was, let's put cool shit downtown and people actually want to go downtown. And the second part of that is, you need to do the infrastructure upgrades so that people can get to and from the cool shit without losing their minds. And we don't have that yet. And it wasn't in the last deal. And so it's explicitly in this deal. That's why the numbers are big and scary and ugly. And that's why the level of public money is where it is. So if you like it or you don't, I mean, this is what they would need to probably spend to make that area actually work as intended.
So you have just proven my point. So if I was you, I would call John and go, I'm happy to do this. I will go on. I will say exactly what I just said, and I will say that.
I need to see the lease before I say I like this deal or not, though. I need to see the lease. I need to see the land swaps.
Fine, but you don't have anybody out right now on the one side saying what you just said. And I've had a lot of people say it to me. I've had a lot of people say, this is not the arena deal. You're right. This is a much better, let's all these other things, the platform.
You got to admit though.
All of those things are going to be better off because
I have many friends on city council. I cringed when I hear everyone singing from the same songbook, because we heard the exact same phrase from like a dozen people, more than just an event center, which is great. It's more than just an event center. But if the idea is you're hanging your hat on, here's a building and here's some supporting infrastructure, you got to kind of walk us through. You can't just say more than just an event center. I need my handheld, and I need you to walk me through.
But who's walking? Who's holding your hand? Nobody.
Right now, nobody.
Nobody. You need a hand holder. Not you, but we. We need a hand holder.
The royal you.
Yes, the royal woo. You. Woo. Us. Wranglers up 2-0 on Abbotsford. It's been a feisty. They don't like each other, which makes for much better, more entertaining hockey.
And of course, game one villain, the notorious Matthew Phillips, ejected for spearing a man in the groin in first period of game one, scores the overtime winner in game two. That's just fun.
Right.
Hockey's fun.
Right. Little disappointed in the crowd on Friday.
I think it's going to build. I mean,
I do too. But I think a lot of us thought that Friday might. Oh, we'll get to the 10,000,
I think that
12,000 level.
I think the thing that worked against them was the weather. It was such a gorgeous night out that if
Oh.
it was patio weather, it's one of the first great patio weekends of the year.
Barbecue cleaning weather.
Yeah, and you're asking people, hey, do that on Sunday when there's no games.
I'm sorry.
But
What did I say?
you're asking people, it's like, hey, come on inside where it's nice and cool and refreshing. Actually, I'm not tired of the heat yet. I'm willing to hang outside with the heat. I have a feeling that as this thing goes along, I mean, I think their announced attendance in the first game was 5,600. Second game was 8,200.
Okay.
I have a feeling it's going to keep growing. I wouldn't be shocked to see 10,000.
That's the Hitman model, right? The Hitman of the third round is when they get into the second or into the 10,000s. And then once it gets into those championship games, now it's a hard ticket to get. I think it's exactly going to follow. But it's a good point too, because it was really a nice weekend too, right?
Yeah, this is, in the first weekend where you don't feel like you're being threatened with snow at any moment. So, I mean, I think that's always the challenge of the NHL. It's the NHL. You never know if it could be back in the playoffs again. So playoff tickets are hard to come by and hard to part with. But for something that's less established, I think they're really encouraged by the thing so far. The prices, like, I think I sat lower bowl on Friday for $40. So if you're on the fence about going to a game, they're right down their seating structure, their payment structure is based on age, not where you sit. So adults, I think, were $40 plus fees. I think lower bowl, or the kids and seniors, or kids and students, were like 25 or something like that. I'm not pulling the numbers completely out of thin air. These do resemble reality somewhat.
Oh no, they're reality. They're reality.
So yeah, if you get a chance to go, game 3 for the Wranglers, they're in Abbotsford on Wednesday night. And coincidentally, the other series in that bracket, Coachella Valley and the Colorado Eagles, also Wednesday night. So potentially we could have both series over by the end of Wednesday.
I thought Coachella, didn't they split?
They had another game. It's up.
Oh, did they
played? Yeah, they played Sunday. They played Sunday too. So they're up.
Okay.
I believe Colorado's up 2-1.
Okay. So it could, so we could be moving rather quickly into that next series.
I'm not sure how if they're gonna go straight into the next one, or if they give them a gap or something. The AHL playoff schedules are very weekend oriented and kind of
as it should
weird.
As it should be. Is there anything on Flames Nation these days, or did you guys just board it up and shutter it because there's it's like nothing to talk
about? Nothing to talk about. So we'll have more Wranglers, more prospects. We're gonna start getting into GM candidates, coaching candidates. This time next week, I believe. Yeah, next Wednesday night, or next Monday night rather, is the fantastic draft lottery. And after the draft lottery, we know where the Flames are picking.
Yeah,
we'll start unveiling some prospect profiles for the draft. So, it's this feels like it's gonna be like a lot like last summer, where we're like, everyone who has a partner who isn't a big sports fan was going, "Don't worry, honey. Next week it'll quiet down."
Oh,
I feel like I've been telling my fiance, "Don't worry, honey. It's gonna quiet down," since I don't even want to think about how long. But it's the nature of the beast, right?
It is the nature of the beast. That's why we like it. That's why we do it. Appreciate this, sir. Again, hopefully we'll have something to talk about next Monday.
Who knows? Sure. They're running out of deals to make and people to fire. So at this point, they're going to start hiring people. Or
I'll tell you what,
making deals.
If you're looking for a story idea, here's a freebie for you, because that's what managing editors are always doing, looking for a free story. Do a deep dive on Carla McLeod as a candidate for a coach.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
You sports and a lot
but
of
what she's done with Chechia, and it's been done all in the open, and it does check so many of the boxes of the struggles here. Now, having said that, I was at an event in which she was asked a specific question whether or not she wanted to coach the NHL, and she said no, she'd rather coach the highest level of women's hockey. Having said all of that, I still would go back. If we're truly going to be open and everybody's on the table, I think she's done one of the best coaching jobs that I've seen in a long time.
And you know what? If you can get her, what I would do is have her sit in the meetings. Just say, hey, even if you don't want to work for us, we'll pay you a fee as a consultant. Tell us who we should get. Tell us, if you're not hiring people, there's a lot of times where teams interview people they might not be able to hire just to get some free opinions.
Yep. You have talked about that since day one, sir. So there's a freebie for you. You're welcome.
Merci.
After being a pain in your ass last Tuesday while you're trying to work, the least I could do is do something to make you productive.
Rob, at this point in our lives, if you're not a pain in someone's ass, you're not trying hard enough. So, I mean, we're all trying to be a pain.
I'm trying very, very hard. Thank you, sir. We will talk to you next week.
See ya.
There you go. Ryan Pike, everybody. Managing editor of Flames Nation.